those of you that wanted to know, there'll be a bit more coach chat later on in the week. We got international break, don't you know? And there's been some really good comments, some excellent comments from you lot. We'll deal with them later on in the week, something like that. We'll have a little bit of fun. To be perfectly honest with you, I've got my eye on a nice little vintage number on eBay at the moment. If I win that auction, there'll be new coach stuff to discuss. For the moment, what I do want to discuss is talk about coach. Somebody who might be getting their coach soon. That's David Moyes. And I don't mean it to be mischievous. I'm honestly just to play on words, because I do wonder how much of the current situation that David Moyes actually knows about. I'm going to cut straight to it because I'll probably put something like this in the title. Darmesh Sheth, you know who that guy is. He's the transfer expert at Sky Sports. We've been lucky enough to have him on Hammers Chat a number of times. He's very, very clued up. He's got a lot of contacts, and generally when he reports something, he's not really reporting rumours that he's read or heard somewhere. I think it's fair to say he's got an extensive contact book. People have phoned him up and he's been told this information. So let me tell you exactly what Darmesh said in interview. This is a couple of days ago. It sort of got lost in the news because the games. West Ham obviously played Olympiacos. Then we had the build up to it. There was still speculation even after the Olympiacos win about David Moyes' future. And then we've obviously had the Nottingham Forest games. But so this sort of was caught up and lost in amongst all the traffic of match day, if you want. This is what Darmesh Sheth said. I'm just going to read it to you now. He said, if Moyes is not to remain at West Ham United, I would expect the next manager to come in and be more of a head coach. He will probably have less control over the recruitment than Moyes has enjoyed over the past few years. But I think that would be a particular kind of manager who would be used to working in a situation whereby they have a technical director, obviously it means Tim Steidten, who picks the players, and the main role for the boss is not managing, but rather it's the coaching. So they would effectively be a head coach rather than a manager. So I would expect that to be the next kind of appointment at West Ham, because we've said this many times, it's so much easier to dismiss a manager rather than get rid of 10 players who are on long-term contracts. Quite clear what he's saying at the end. Basically, if the manager doesn't suit the playing style, then it's a lot easier just to get rid of one person and get rid of a load of other people and then replace them with somebody who, you know, a load of players who fit the playing style of any given manager. I don't disbelieve any of this stuff. I do believe Darmesh has been told it, but I also really think that it's true anyway. I do believe this is the direction the club's going. We know it from the rumours and we know it from what we can see before our eyes. Well, what we can see before our eyes is the fact that we have appointed a technical director, football director, whatever you want to call him. We know pretty much for a fact, bearing in mind none of us were sat in the negotiation rooms ourselves, that at least 2 of the summer signings have been Tim Steidten signings. So we can already see the evidence of our own eyes. We know that it was Tim Steidten who sat down and got Jared Bowen to sign a new contract. We know it was Steidten who flew, not himself, he doesn't fly, he needs a jet to do such. It'd be a miracle, really, wouldn't it? It was only him that went over to Amsterdam to get Edson Alvarez and to get Mohamed Kudus over to Germany to obviously get Konstantinos Mavropanos. He's heavily involved. There's been a lot of rumours that he's been a little bit involved with trying to get involved in negotiations with Divine Obama and his new contract. This guy has got his fingers in all the pies. And that tells us something we need to know. Then we've got the messaging that was coming out from the club, which was very much last week. David Moyes not going to be offered a new deal. No new deal for David Moyes. So if he's not going to be offered a new deal, and those are the rumours, and the suggestion is that David Moyes will not get to pick whoever we go and buy in January, then that sort of fits in with what Darmesh is saying, isn't it, really? And look, I think that's reason for us to be excited. It really is. I've not quite got my head around Will still being at the game. I know he was there. I know who he is. I've not quite formulated my own opinion on it just yet. So, hey, look, as I say, we've got international break coming up. There's plenty of time to discuss that. I want to sort of read a little bit more between the lines on that one. But Gio did a video on it yesterday. If you haven't seen that, go and check that one out. But I think it makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. I think if we pick the right head coach, and then I think this is something that's going to have to be right. This is a massive shift for David Moyes, and I do think David Moyes, whilst I do think he is a stubborn individual, I do think he's less stubborn, as I've mentioned before, than some of us give him credit for. I think the fact that he went back and worked with Sullivan for a second time shows he can't be that stubborn. I personally, I would have been really quite miffed with him from the first time that he didn't give me the contract after I'd saved the club from relegation. That's how I would have seen it anyway. He swallowed his pride. I think both men did, and David Moyes came back to work at West Ham. We've already seen this season David Moyes is already incorporating players that are not his players. So he's shown he can do it. The fact that he's persevered to such an extent that he has with Danny Ings, who we now know was not one of his signings. It was a gift. It was bequeathed to him by David Sullivan. He's still sort of played him, hasn't he? So I don't think he's quite as stubborn as we like to make out. But what I would say is, going by Darmesh Sheth's description of this head coach and taking training and doing tactics and that sort of thing, I'm not sure that's David Moyes. I've got to say, I've heard many a story, actually, from West Ham training ground, that David Moyes isn't on the training pitch for half the sessions. Kevin Nolan, as I understood it last season, certainly was, I don't know if it's changed with Heitinger, by the way, but certainly Kevin Nolan last season was a guy taking a lot of sessions, and I think, halfway through the training day or however long they would train for, David Moyes would then come in and put his stamp on things. That's what I heard anyway. I think that when you're maybe it's not the right person to speak of at the moment. I'm going to use him as an example because he would famously is known for having 2 training sessions each day. Mauricio Pochettino. He very much hands-on, very much a coach, very much there training young players to be better, training players in other positions, always got the tracksuit on, always got the boots on, out there on the training pitch twice a day with all the players. And I think, David Moyes is a traditional type manager, isn't he? An Alec Ferguson type, an Arsene Wenger type. Arsene Wenger, for instance, was so entrenched in the whole day-to-day running of Arsenal Football Club that actually the architect's plans for the Emirates Stadium were actually constantly being passed through his hands. He was dealing with player recruitment, he was dealing with diet, he was dealing with the infrastructure at the club, absolutely everything. That's not what West Ham want to do now, but certainly that's how David Moyes, that's how he was at Everton. That's how he would have been brought up. That's the way it used to be. But it's just not the way anymore. And I think if we are going to do this, then West Ham are probably going to look to bring somebody in who is more suited to that. For a lot of these continental coaches, that's not a surprise for them. They've already bought into this stuff. It's just in England we've been behind the times with it. That's the truth of the matter. So I think whilst David Moyes may be affronted by, and I'm saying that on his behalf, I don't know that to be the case. He might be affronted by seeing some of his power base diminished. A lot of these coaches that come over from the continent don't feel the same way. They actually expect to come in and work with a director of football, and they give the director of football not so much a list of players but a list of requirements. So they don't say I want this particular right back. They say actually I want a right back with these qualities who can play in this system, and then the director of football is then mandated to go out and go and purchase someone who matches that description. I think it's something we'll probably do. I think my only concern is, if you like, is how much does David Moyes know about this? Because whilst a lot of it makes sense, I think certainly the way David Moyes is conducting himself, the words don't match. The words from David Moyes don't match the evidence before our own eyes, what we're being told in leaks from the club, and what we're being told by, for instance, Darmesh Sheth in this instance. And you have to say that he's well briefed. Darmesh Sheth wouldn't have just made this stuff up. It does. Well, number one, he wouldn't because of his journalistic integrity, and secondly, he doesn't need to. Darmesh Sheth's journalistic career, is not predicated upon him leaking a story about West Ham. It really doesn't need to. That he can go and leak stories about, let's be fair, go and leak a story about Ten Hag if he wants to. If that's what the suggestion is, he's just making this stuff up for hits. He wouldn't even cover West Ham at all. Let's be perfectly honest. There are other more newsworthy things to cover. I think he's been briefed on this. I really do. I think he's certainly been given this information, and it's interesting. I think there's a part of it that's exciting, and I would like to see what happens. I think really we are heavily reliant on David Moyes though, because if we believe what we can see at face value, and that is that David Moyes is going to leave at the end of the season, then realistically, we need him. We need him to sort things out this season. We need him to have enough, I guess, professional pride for him to want to finish on a high. He's going to want to leave West Ham, I guess, and we have to hope this is the case, with West Ham in a very, very strong position. Obviously, ideally, with another trophy win, or even more ideally, would be in Europe again. He could turn around and say, I did a magnificent job at West Ham. And do you know what? The perception from the outside, and he would have done, let's be fair, not just perception from the outside. He could turn around and say, I had a really, really good stint there. The fact of the matter is, not everybody would have liked the football all the time. I would count myself amongst those people, don't get me wrong. But I think he would probably be able to hold his head up high and go and walk into another job. But it is interesting. I don't know. It will still stuff. I'm going to have a little look at that. But there you go. You heard it here. Well, not even first. You didn't hear it first because Darmesh Sheth said it on Sky Sports first, or whatever interview was given at the time. But that is when David Moyes goes, and he is expected to go at the end of the season. West Ham will be appointing not a football manager, but a head coach.